She killed her boyfriend by locking him in a suitcase. On February 23rd of 2020, 42-year-old Sarah Boone called the police and said that her boyfriend had gotten stuck in a suitcase when they were playing a game, and that he was purple, wasn't breathing, and dead. Playing a game. Yeah, Sarah. When the police arrived, they did indeed find a very dead Jorge Torres inside of this suitcase. But it seems like Sarah didn't tell them the actual truth. They weren't just playing a game, because police found a video on Sarah's phone that said otherwise. In this video, Jorge was very obviously struggling to get out of the suitcase. He kept telling Sarah that he couldn't breathe, and she kept mocking him. But some of the things that she was saying was very, very interesting. In one part of the video, he said, "Sarah, I can't breathe." And she said, "Well, that's what happens when you choke me." In my opinion, it seems like Jorge was actually abusing Sarah, and this was her retribution towards him. Of course, this is all just speculation. How did Sarah get Jorge in the suitcase, and why did she do it? These are questions that I'm not sure we'll ever know the answers to. On February 25th, Sarah was charged with second-degree murder. What do you guys think?
On a cold Friday the 13th in 2012, a horrible disaster would occur. Hello, true crimers. This is the story of the Costa Concordia disaster. Viewer discretion is advised. The Costa Concordia was a massive luxury liner. It first set sail in 2005. It was about 951 feet long, which was longer than the Titanic. It could also hold 3,780 passengers on top of the crew. On January 13th, 2012, it would depart from the city of Civitavecchia, which is in Italy. It left at 7:18 p.m., and by a couple hours later, it was near Giglio Island, which would be this little island right there. Now, they were trying to go past the island to do a maritime salute, which was normal. Underneath, there were some rock formations that they were starting to notice. Captain Schettino, who had been a captain for about 7 years, he ordered the ship to go one direction, but apparently due to a language barrier, it went the other direction. This is supposedly because the helmsman was Indonesian, so there was a language barrier. At 9:45 p.m., the boat's stern, while the ship was trying to move away, struck and connected with the reef below. It created a 174-foot tear on the ship. 5 compartments, and also including the engine room, began to take on water. Now, when this happened, passengers obviously felt it, and they also heard a very loud crack. But according to witnesses, a lot of the staff was going around saying, "Everything's fine, go back to your staterooms." And then they started to order people to wear their life vests. The goal was they were trying to reduce the panicking, but to do so, they lied. And somewhere around 10:14, the ship began to list to one side. The ship's captain, Schettino, he was still downplaying what was happening, even though the ship was literally going to one side. Then the blackout happened. By 10:39 p.m., they finally acknowledged out loud, "Okay, yeah, we need to abandon ship now." By the way, the captain, Schettino, he just ordered tugboats to come at this point, not rescuers. Because of how the ship was listing to one side, it was very difficult to launch lifeboats. So they had to use like a rope to have people like get down from the side of the ship. At 11:20 p.m., the few lifeboats that were able to launch, the captain literally abandoned ship and got on a lifeboat, claiming he fell in. When he was ordered back to the ship by another crew member, he said no. Ultimately, 32 people lost their lives that night. This is just some of them. There were obviously a ton of injuries, but mostly everyone survived. The captain was charged with manslaughter, and he was sentenced to 16 years in prison. Look at this damage.
This mother murdered her 3 children on Mother's Day. On Sunday, May 8th, the morning of Mother's Day, 12-year-old Natalie Flores, 11-year-old Kevin Yanes, and 8-year-old Nathan Yanes were found dead in the Woodland Hills neighborhood of the San Fernando Valley. On Saturday night, a neighbor heard a woman who was later identified as 38-year-old Angela Flores screaming erratically as she held her Bible. Then she was later transported to hospital. The next morning at 7:40 a.m., paramedics and police were called to the house after her 16-year-old son alerted neighbors that his siblings were dead. Angela Flores confessed to murdering her 3 children, but she said that her 16-year-old son also helped her. The cause of the children's deaths have been withheld by authorities, but it is alleged that she murdered her kids because she thought that they were possessed. Angela was charged with 3 counts of murder and is being held on a $6 million bond. And her 16-year-old son is currently being held at a juvenile hall with no bail. This case is still pretty fresh, so I'll make sure to pin any updates in the comments. This mother planned the murder of her sons for a week. On May 2nd, 2022, 38-year-old Trin Nguyen shot her 9-year-old and her 13-year-old son in their beds in their home in Pennsylvania. That day, police was called by Trin's neighbor. The man told police that Trin had approached him and handed him a box of photos and asked him to give the box to her ex-husband who he worked with. She then pointed a gun at his face and pulled the trigger twice. However, the gun did not fire. He then quickly disarmed Trin and she fled the area in her car. He then told police that Trin had 2 children, so they searched the home and found both boys in critical condition from gunshot wounds to their head. Later that day, police found Trin at a church parking lot in her car. Police found heroin and a note in Trin's car that was dated a week earlier stating what to do with her and her son's ashes. They also noticed that Trin tried to end her life by consuming large amounts of narcotics. TJ and Nelson were on life support until they passed away the following Friday. Investigators still haven't found a motive for the shooting, but investigators did discover documents showing that Trin was going to be evicted from her home that was owned by her ex-sister-in-law, and she owed about $11,000 in rent.
Let's talk about what happened to 13-year-old Laura Yala. Laura was born on October 29, 1988. She's described as being a very shy and reserved young girl, but she was also very organized and did very well in school. She was an honor student and was a part of the chess club, writing club, garden club, and she always got A+ on everything, and she took school very seriously. On Sunday, March 10, 2002, Laura asked her mom if she could borrow some money to walk to the store nearby. She needed to buy some newspaper for a project that wasn't even due tomorrow, but she really wanted to get it done tonight. Her mother, Angelica, said, "No, it's 10 p.m., you're not walking to the store by yourself," but Laura insisted that she really wanted to finish this project tonight. Despite her mother telling her no, Laura left the apartment complex at around 10:15 p.m. She walked to the Broadway convenience store that was located inside the Conoco gas station that was literally less than 100 feet from her apartment. It was literally only a 2-minute walk. Around 5 to 10 minutes after Laura left, her mother, Angelica, realizes that she was gone. She started to get worried because it's only a 2-minute walk, so why was Laura gone for so long? She decides to walk to the store, and when she gets inside, Laura is nowhere to be found. Angelica asked the employees if they saw a little girl come in and buy some newspaper, and they say yes. They said that a girl matching Laura's description came inside, bought the newspaper, and then quickly left alone. She starts to look around and she ends up finding Laura's sandals and the newspaper she bought scattered in this parking lot between the gas station and the apartment. Angelica immediately began to scream and panic, and she called the police department and reported Laura as missing. Since Laura's belongings were found scattered, police believe that she may have been abducted. The convenience store didn't have any cameras, so they weren't able to see if maybe someone approached Laura or if maybe someone followed after her. People in the community were very supportive towards Laura's family, and they were out there helping the police and searching for Laura. A witness comes forward and says that they saw a full-size, mid-1980s maroon cargo van near the convenience store at the time of Laura's disappearance. A neighbor comes forward and says that they also saw the same van parked in the parking lot where Laura's belongings were found. They said the sliding door was open and that either a Hispanic or Caucasian male was standing near the van. Since it's believed to be a work van, police were able to track down a man named Martin Marmolejo. Martin worked as a plumber at the gas station, and the night that Laura disappeared, Martin and his partner were actually there working, but his partner left and Martin stayed there alone until 10 p.m. His van does match the description of the van seen at the time Laura disappeared, and police have questioned him, but they believe he's more of a witness than a suspect in the abduction. So police continue with the investigation, and they start to follow a new theory that maybe Laura was put on a bus and taken to Reynosa, Mexico. A bus driver from the El Expreso bus company told police that a man and a woman boarded this bus with a young girl fitting Laura's description. When he checked the passenger's log, this girl's name was Laura A.
Okay, part 2 is up now. This is part 2 on what happened to 13-year-old Laura Yala. So police were able to track down the couple that boarded this bus with the little girl, and they realized that when they arrived to Reynosa, Mexico, all 3 of them separated. So to this day, police have not been able to confirm this sighting, and they kind of think that this was a dead end. So then a few months go by since Laura's disappearance, and police have no leads, no suspects, and no idea as to what happened to Laura. Then, in August of 2002, police began investigating 3 men in connection with the murder of several women in East End, Texas. These 3 men are 25-year-old Walter Alexander Sorto, 24-year-old Rafael Cubas, and 16-year-old Eduardo Navarro. In February of 2003, the 3 of them were arrested for the R-word and murder of several women. Edgardo and Walter were sentenced to death, while Navarro was only sentenced to 13 years since he was only the getaway driver and was only 16 years old. So the trio admitted that they would sometimes use Edgardo's father's car to use for these abductions. So police searched the father's car and they end up finding blood that doesn't belong to any of the known victims. These detectives are familiar with the case of Laura Yala, so they call the Houston Police Department and they tell them, listen, you need to get a DNA sample from Laura's family ASAP because we might have found something. So they get the DNA sample and test it to the DNA found in the back of the van, and it comes back as a match. This blood found in the back of this van used by 3 men to abduct and murder young females belonged to 13-year-old Laura Ayala. The trio says that they had nothing to do with Laura's disappearance, and to this day, they deny everything. Since Laura's body has not been found and the only evidence they found in the van was Laura's blood, these 3 men have never been charged with her disappearance or murder. To this day, Edgardo and Walter are still on death row and they continue to deny having anything to do with Laura's disappearance. Navarro already served his 13-year sentence in juvenile prison and he's just out and about now. I'm sure if he did have something to do with Laura's disappearance, there's no way he's going to admit to that now because he's free. I truly hope that before these men are executed, they come forward and let Laura's family know what happened. Laura would be in her 30s now and she had a full life ahead of her. It's really sad that all she was trying to do was buy some newspaper to complete a school project and someone had to take her life from her. I know Angelica lives with a lot of regret and she wishes she could have stopped Laura from leaving that night. The last update I saw is that Angelica still lives in that same apartment and that she hopes that Laura will come home soon. If you guys know anything about what happened to Laura, please contact the Houston Police Department. She needs to be found and properly laid to rest. All my thoughts and prayers go out to Laura's family, and I hope that she's found soon.
This woman wrote her K-Threeler's name in BLOOD, but police sadly missed it.
It would be nearly 40 years before police realized that Loreta Jones, on the night of her murder, left them one final clue as to who the culprit was. When Loreta was found in her house stabbed to death, there were no signs of a struggle. So investigators concluded it was likely someone she knew, and a former boyfriend named Tom was the main suspect. Sadly, due to the lack of DNA forensic evidence, they didn't have enough to arrest him and the case went cold. A couple of decades later, on the insistence of Loreta's daughter, the case would be reopened. And in the hope of getting some DNA evidence, Loreta's body would be exhumed. But they were able to recover nothing until one of her friends said that she remembered that Loreta had left a name in blood on the carpet the night of her murder. Police took out some photos of the crime scene and they could indeed see a T and an O. And although the photo didn't capture an M, they assumed it was going to spell out Tom. A friend offered to wear a wire and got Tom to confess. Tom came clean after 40 years. He was arrested and charged. For